Welcome everyone to Geforce Tech Broadcast. Today I have a review of a mid to low range graphics card. And what I'm going to do with my reviews from now on for graphics cards is I actually want to be able to spend some time with them. I had a little over 3 weeks with this card to where I played around with it. I used it in my own system. It was this card that I used for 3 weeks for everything: gaming, video editing, all the other applications that I might use. And what I have here is actually the EVGA 650 Ti Boost. This is the super clocked edition, and the reason why I went with the super clocked was mainly because the price point wasn't that much higher than the standard clock edition. I'd rather pay $5, $6, sometimes $10 more. Usually it's not a whole lot more, at least I didn't find for these. And it'd already be pre-overclocked for me where I don't have to mess around with it. Yes, I do like overclocking my components, but if I don't have to pay that much and it's already done, that's a big advantage for me. A few things about the card. It is PCI Express Generation 3.0. That's not really taking effect now, but it will in the future. 2 gigabytes of memory, 768 CUDA cores, and the base clock for this is a little over gigahertz, and it is 1072 megahertz, and the boost clock is 11,037 megahertz. Or 1,137 megahertz. So it's already pre-overclocked for us, so we don't have to worry about any of that. It's got a really high clock speed, and the main difference between this is that the memory interface is actually 192-bit. It has a little bit higher memory interface there, which can allow us to get some better performance than the regular 660. And that really, I've already done an unboxing and went through a few of the things there. This card does run about 180 bucks. 170 to 180 depending on what kinds you get. There's all kinds of different ones out there now by different manufacturers. That being said, let's get in and see what kind of numbers I actually got out of this. And we actually might have a visitor. Alright guys, I had a visitor. He wouldn't leave me alone, so Magoo's going to be part of the review today. But for my 3D Mark Cloud Gate scores, I did all kind of synthetic benchmarks first, and I actually went and did videos on all that. I mean, I did videos on all this, so you can go back. I'll probably at the end throw them up around everywhere, so you can just click on them and go to them if you want, or I'll link them down below in the description so you can go and play around and see me actually gaming and benchmarking with this card. For the 3D Cloud Gate, I got about 1,500's around there. Actually 15,000, sorry, my brain's a little foggy today. It's a little tired. About 15,792 was my total score there. Did a video on that, so you can check that out. The 3D Mark Fire, I didn't do the extreme because I didn't feel it necessary for this, but it's a 3,819 for the standard Fire edition for the new 3D Mark. Unigine Heaven 4.0, I got a score of 502. And frames per second of 19.9, and you really notice some lag there. You can see in the video, it really has some stuttering. Once you get below that 30 frames per second, you start to really have some issues. Now, once I got into the games, I did benchmarking on all these games live. I'm going to start doing that on Twitch. I'm going to start doing some more live events on Twitch, but I actually did most of my benchmarking and most of my gameplay on there, to where you can go through and you can see what frames per second I was getting. I like that better than just a 4 or 5 minute video to where they're just saying what scores they got. Don't say it, actually show me. That's what I like to actually be able to actually see the scores. For BioShock Infinite, I did run the benchmark utility for that. Just because it's a little easier and it's based on the game, so you're going to get the same type of scores based on all of your cards. And the BioShock Infinite benchmark utility, I got an average of 75 frames per second, minimum of 39 and max of 110, easily playable. I have everything set at the very high or ultra settings. Usually for AA filtering, I usually put that at 4x, and you'll see once I get into Crisis 3 and some other things, I did a little bit of different things there. Yeah, I know. So for Borderlands 2, I actually got really good frames per second, easily playable. I mean, I was getting above anywhere between the 30 and 70 for the average. I played this for a decent amount of time, and I might have somewhat messed up the review because I actually really got into the game. But you can, if you just check out my my video of that, you can see the benchmark and see the frames per second as I went along and played. But overall, I had a really good experience with Borderlands 2 with this card. I mean, the physics, that's actually going along with the card was really nice, and I didn't really have any lag with the game. Nothing is noticeable. I'm not getting as high as benchmarks on that game as others did. I will say that. Some of the reviews out there were getting, 70, between 60 and 70 frames per second. I did get a little lower than that, but that could have been, because I was streaming at the same time, or I was doing some other activity. I don't know why. That's just how benchmarks go. But I played it with no problem. I didn't have any issues. It didn't ruin my experience in any aspect. Far Cry 3 is a little bit of a different story. That title kind of pushes your graphics card a little bit more than some of these other games that I've previously mentioned. Far Cry 3, I got an average of 36 frames per second, max of 61 and minimum of 18. I have 2 videos on that. They're pretty lengthy, but if you're interested in that, definitely check those out because I do display the frames per second as the videos are going. But overall, I didn't have any issues. There was a few times during the game where things got a little intense and there was a little bit of stuttering. As you could tell, you got below that 30 frames per second. I did notice that a little bit. It didn't really hinder my performance or how I enjoyed the game, but I did have everything on the ultra high, or the highest settings I could, and usually the general settings that I run at. If you want to see that, again, check out the other video that I did on that to see what scores I ran. For Crysis 3 is the new benchmark title right now, if you ask me. And I had SMAA at medium, and I had the AA filtering at 4X. Everything else was set to ultra, or the highest setting. I don't know what, ultra excellent, whatever the highest they have. My average frames per second was 27, and it was noticeably, it wasn't really that playable. I mean, you had a lot of stuttering, a lot of kind of jittering. It just wasn't the best gameplay. Minimum was at 10. Max was at 35, but if you bump some of those settings down to medium, even play around with some of the AA filtering and the SMAA, play around with that, you can easily get above 30 frames per second, but you are going to have to bump that performance down a little bit. It's still going to be better than any console game out there, and probably anyone in the future. I do want to mention that. And another thing that I don't have on my little score sheet here, but I did do a lot of gameplay and benchmarking with it, was Civilization 5. I love that game, and that game I was actually able to play at 2560 by 1440 and get above 40 frames per second. I didn't have any issues. 1080p, it runs perfectly fine. Everything's set to high. This game's not really the kind of game that puts a lot of strain on your GPU. It will strain it, and it will max the clock speed out on it, but it is a game that I think does take a little bit of advantage of a good CPU also. But that game was easily playable. But the rest of these games at 2560 by 1440, the only game I really had ease in playing at that resolution, I had to bump a few of the settings down, was BioShock Infinite. I was able to play around with the settings, bump a few settings down to medium, and be able to get a good game flow out of that. Be able to get well over that 30 frames per second. But overall, this card is perfect if you run at 1080p. If you're running at 2560 by 1440 or 2560 by 1600, or you're running on Infinity or Surround, if you're running more than one monitor, this is not the card for you. This is more if you're just running 1080p and you want a one system setup, one monitor setup. That's going to be the way to go. Overall, though, I was extremely pleased with the card. It is going to run about 80 degrees in your case, or at least in mine it did. And let's see, that's probably what it's going to run about most people's cases. I have all Noctua and Cougar fans, so I know I'm getting adequate temperature. I mean, I think I got 6, 7, 8 fans in my system, so I know I'm getting decent airflow to the card. But it just ran at 80. It is a little hotter here. It's 75, 80 degrees, and it is getting slightly humid here in the Midwest or Mideast, whatever you want to characterize Ohio as. But overall, I was very happy with this card. How does it stack up against some of AMD's cards? That's something that we might need to see a little bit of a price drop. The 7850 is probably the card that's going to get as close to this as possible. The 7790 actually doesn't quite perform as well as this, but that's about $40 cheaper already. I've seen the 7790s for about $135. I just saw one a couple days ago for it. It was overclocked edition for $135. So that being said, would I recommend this card? Yes, if you're to run it at 1080p, this is definitely a good card for you. If you're just getting into build your own first system, this is probably a very good budget-oriented card I would get. I would not get the 650 Ti non-boost, or I would not get the 650. This is the lowest card I would get for decent gameplay at 1080p. Yes, there's some games where you're going to have to bump the settings down slightly, but nothing that's going to really diminish the visual quality of the game that much. Most of the games play fine. There was a few games, like I said, Crysis 3, and I had a few glitches with Borderlands 2, but I think that if I went back and played around with the benchmarking, I shouldn't really have any problems with it. It's not really a big demanding title. I know I didn't benchmark all the games in this, but I tried to get some of the newer ones. I meant to get Tomb Raider thrown in here, but I just didn't have the time to get into the game flow of that game. But I do want to do that, and I do plan on getting Battlefield 3 or 4 or one of those up just to get some testing going. If you like reviews like this where I actually use the graphics card and actually do live streams of the games that I'm playing with doing some benchmarking along with that so you can see what's going on, definitely let me know. I don't really see anybody doing that, mainly because most other people don't have the time. But if I'm going to buy a graphics card, I'm going to actually spend some time with it and play around with it a little bit. So that's going to conclude. Definitely go pick one of these up if you're looking for under $200 graphics card and you don't want to spend a whole lot more. Maybe it's your first system. This is the way to go. If you can find the overclocked or superclocked edition for around the same price, pick it up. EVGA has good warranty support, so it's a reference design card. That being said, it had a nice cooler on it. It did run at 80 degrees. That's about the max it got. If you want to see more broadcasts like this, again, just let me know. Well, you guys already know how to let me know. I will see you guys next time, and like always, thanks for watching J Wolf Tech Broadcast.